Hello and welcome to my video on discursive writing. I hope that you find this really helpful. I'm going to go through what Nessa says about discursive writing, and that's really helpful for you to understand what they think discursive means. And just so you know, it doesn't mean the same thing to other people around the world. So you need to be really familiar with their interpretation of that. We're going to look at some definitions of the word discursive and how that could apply to the form. We will also be looking at the main features, and this will be really helpful in giving you an idea of what to look for when you're reading and analysing discursive writing, and then when you want to write in this form yourself, it'll give you a really good way of knowing how to write in that form. And lastly, we're going to look at some examples. But before we go any further, I would like to just set the scene a little bit about the concept of discursive. And we'll start with this man here, Narayan Gangapadia. He wrote an essay where he said, "I have always been drawn to the personal essay in which you could see something of the author himself apart from the theme. The personal essay was enjoyable because it had the writer's likes, dislikes, and his observations, always with a social flavour of humour, sympathy, aversion, style, charm, even oddity." So see here, what I'm trying to really draw your attention to is that a discursive essay is very much like what we'd see as a personal essay, where the view of the writer is at the forefront of the writing, and it very much is about their observations. And it is a type of writing where there is a flavour of humour, there is a definite style, and it's okay for it to be quirky and different. It's not something that is really formal and set in stone that we often think of when we think of essay writing. Gangapadia also says, "Unfortunately, this style of essay is not in vogue today. Yes, we have feature writers in magazines and newspapers, but not the discursive essayist. This is because the discursive essay can come not out of scholarship or research, but out of one's personality and style. The scope for such a composition is unlimited. The mood may sometimes be somber, hilarious, satirical, and the theme may range from what the author notices from his window to what he sees in his wastebasket to a cataclysm." So see, there is a huge scope for how you write discursive essays and what you write about. And more importantly, what I want you to see is that it's based on your personality and your style. So the great thing about discursive writing is that you can make it your own thing, and it really gives you an opportunity for you to have your own voice and showcase your voice. And it can have any mood and any tone that you want it to have, and you can write about anything. Now, that can also be quite scary because it is so open, but I really want you to be aware of, actually it's very freeing type of form of writing as well.
In 2019, the discursive essay was introduced into the new syllabus, where it became a new form for students to write in the exam and in assessment tasks, and also to study. Prior to this, it was not really something that was explicitly taught, and it wasn't really a phrase or a term that was used. And so there was a lot of confusion as to what this new form of writing is all about. So NESA helpfully provided their own definition of the discursive essay, and it's important for you to know what they think the discursive essay is. They see that discursive essay are texts whose primary focus is to explore an idea or variety of topics. I want you to see that the word explore here is really the focus here. It is a type of writing essentially where you are just going through an idea and working through the process of what you think about that, discussing it, and wandering around in that topic. Here are some more information from NESA. They say that discursive texts involve the discussion of an idea or opinion, here's this word discussion again, without the direct intention of persuading the reader, listener, or viewer to adopt any single point of view. Discursive text can be humorous or serious in tone and can have a formal or informal register. Discursive text can include texts such as feature articles, creative nonfiction, blogs, personal essays, documentaries, and speeches. So here we have now more ideas about what a discursive text could be, and it's opened up even more. And this can be quite confusing, but I want you to come back to this idea that really it's about exploring, it's about discussing without the direct intention of persuading the reader. Now, as we go through, we'll unpack this in a little bit more detail. But for the sake of this video, I really am going to focus mainly on personal essays as the type of discursive essay that I think can work really well for students. Now, in order to help us understand this idea of discursive, we're going to look at what the dictionary says about this. So the first definition that I found is that discursive means simply moving from topic to topic without order. In a sense, it's like you're rambling. So in some contexts, discursive very much means this idea of rambling or wandering. For example, he gave a discursive lecture. Now, this could potentially have negative connotations to it, and you don't want to be writing a piece of writing an essay where you are wandering around and having no purpose, no aim, and no order. So it's quite the art form to ramble and wander, but also doing it in a way that continues your ideas and develops your ideas, and you still have a way of engaging your audience. Another definition that I came across, it comes from the idea of philosophy. So we can see that discursive also has ideas of a method of resolving complex expressions into simpler or more basic ones. So potentially it's this idea of communicating complex ideas into a simple way for people to understand and grapple with. And it can also be referring to analytical reasoning. This might appeal to you, and this might be something that you can see as a way into using this form of writing. So essentially, what I want you to start to understand is that discursive writing really, it's just a useful label to cover a whole range of creative non-fiction writing styles. That's how I want you to see it. I want you to see it as creative, non-fiction writing styles. So understanding this flexibility is one of the keys to building your level of comfort with writing in the discursive mode. In order to help us understand what discursive writing is, it might be helpful for us to consider how these elements are used. I would like you to hit pause and write down these elements. When I refer to register, I want you to know that I'm talking about the degree of formality or informality of language used. So in a really formal piece of essay writing, they are going to have a very different register to that of a blog. So there is a difference between the formality and the informality of language used in those types. And the register is used for their purpose. And so it's appropriate. So for a blog, you expect the language to be informal. You expect it to be colloquial at times. You expect it to be really casual. You wouldn't expect that register to occur in an academic piece of writing. And so when you're writing an academic piece of writing, when you're writing a really formal essay, your register is going to be quite formal. Now, in terms of discursive writing, it can have a formal or informal register. It doesn't matter which one, it comes down to, I want you to see, it comes down to the purpose. So when you are writing a discursive essay, you have to think, well, what's my purpose? Who's my audience? And then you adopt the register that is appropriate for that. When you're looking at examples of discursive writing, you need to think about the composer and their purpose. What is their particular social setting? How is that going to influence their register? Now, also another one of these elements that I want to talk to you about is voice. This is talking about the composer's voice. The particular qualities of the composer's voice are manifested by such things as their method of expression. For example, maybe an ironic narrator and specific language. So when we refer to voice, we're talking about the composer's voice, and and this is created through their expression and language. Okay, and the last one I want to talk to you about, skip through all of these ones, is tone. Tone is the voice adopted by a particular speaker to indicate emotion, feeling, or attitude to subject matter. And it can also refer to the attitude that the writer displays towards a subject. So it could be playful, serious, ironic, formal, etc. Okay, so when we're talking about tone, that's the sort of thing I'm referring to. So for discursive writing, a writer can choose to adopt all different types of features, structure, language, voice, and tone. There is no right or wrong way to do that. It all comes down to the purpose and the audience. When you're looking at examples of discursive writing, come back to this brainstorm here and think about, okay, so ask yourself these questions. What's the purpose for this writing? What are the features? What's the structure? And these might be helpful ways for you to break up how you want to annotate the text as well. So we're going to look at some common features. So more specifically, what stylistic choices are often utilized when people write in a discursive way. So usually, and not always, a writer will have a thesis, and a thesis, as you know, is a topic. Okay, a topic that the writer is going to focus on. So when you're looking at a discursive essay, you need to think about, firstly, what is the topic of this? What is the thesis? And when you're writing your own discursive piece, you are going to explore a topic, and you need to be really clear about what your topic is. Mostly, from what I've seen so far, discursive writing has a conversational tone. And often, the conversational tone reveals the author's personality. And conversational tones are created through the language choices, through the sentence construction, through how they decide to order their sentences, all sorts of ways. Often, but not always, what I've seen is discursive writing uses humour, and that can be really effective, and also it really that also enhances the conversational tone. We also see in discursive writing evidence that wide reading or background knowledge has been called upon. So through allusions, where the writer alludes to a famous person or an idea, a concept, an icon, a TV show, a historical figure, the writer will allude to something that is well known, and will often assume that their audience knows that reference. And it's used to make reference to something that then calls for the audience, for the reader, to understand the ideas that the writer is seeking to suggest. So when we talk about the fat man in the red suit and the white beard, we know that we're talking about Santa Claus. We know all of the ideas that are encompassed in Santa Claus, and we don't need to explain that reference. Now, anecdotes. These are often personal stories or stories that are used in the discursive piece, that are often used to illustrate an idea and to add detail. Orientation. This is the beginning of the essay. And this is something that it's really an important part of the piece. And often it's an opening sentence or it's a short paragraph, and it's designed to encourage the reader to want to know more. So the first paragraph and the first sentence are key to demonstrating the ideas in the essay, and also going to grab the attention of the audience. And with a discursive essay, the conclusion is quite important. It can often be reflective, open-ended, can pose a question, or it can be circular, where it is calling back to an earlier joke or thread or an idea. And it's deliberately crafted to do those things, which really shows that the writer has worked cleverly out how to structure and hold together their piece of writing. So the endings are really important, and they're just as important as the beginning. So when you're thinking about your own discursive writing, thinking about what you want your audience, your reader, to be left thinking about. Do you want them to think deeper about something? Do you want them to finish off with a bit of a laugh, where you might prompt them to think about something in a different way, or to laugh at themselves, or whatever it might be? But it's something that's been, the ending is thoughtful, and it's not just quickly put together. The writers really thought about that. Okay, so I think it's time now for us to look at some examples of discursive writing so you can have a much greater idea of what I'm talking about. So some of you have already had an opportunity to write your own discursive pieces, and so you've dabbled in what you think the form might require, and you've done a really great job of that. So now let's have a look at what we expect to see for discursive writing. Okay, so the first example I have for you today is a piece from Judith Lucy's book, The Lucy Family Alphabet. And if you know Judith Lucy, you know that she is an Australian comedian. And so her writing, what we expect, is going to be really quite humorous. Here's an example from one of her essays called A is for Adoption. This is the opening paragraph. I am constantly amazed by the behaviour people can justify by saying it's Christmas, largely because that phrase has been as cheery for me as it's terminal. I think many of us find the Yuletide season as enjoyable as an incontinent relative, and some people even have to deal with those on the day, as it is a time when we cannot avoid the notion of family. So looking at our collection of features here, I want you to have a think about which of these did you notice in Judith Lucy's opening paragraph. If you haven't already done so, write down these features, because this is a really helpful go-to list, especially for helping you when you come to write your own discursive writing. So when we see this collection of features and we think about Judith Lucy's opening paragraph, it's quite clear that we can see a thesis. She's talking about Christmas, and in particular, she's talking about family, and we are going to anticipate that this is going to be the common thread, the topic of her response. It's very much a conversational tone, and that's displayed through her language choices. Humour is used. She uses hyperbole to emphasise to almost an extreme exaggeration for a comic effect. We also see that there are anecdotes being used, and she has a really engaging orientation. Often it's through conveying an idea in a way that we wouldn't normally expect. So on one hand, we wouldn't expect someone to talk about Christmas in this way, but on another hand, it's also done in a way that connects the reader to this, because a lot of people would experience that and know exactly what she's talking about. All right, let's have a look at another example. This one comes from one of my favourite writers, George Orwell, and we are going to look at his essay called A Nice Cup of Tea. If you look up tea in the first cookery book that comes to hand, you will probably find that it is unmentioned, or at most you will find a few lines of sketchy instructions which give no ruling on several of the most important points. This is curious, not only because tea is one of the mainstays of civilization in this country, as well as in Australia and New Zealand, but because the best manner of making it is the subject of violent disputes. Okay, so looking at Orwell's opening paragraph, we can see that yes, he does have a thesis, a topic. He has written his essay on the single topic of tea and how it should be made. He obviously felt very passionately about this topic, and so he is exploring this idea. And so you can see that you don't have to be writing about things that are serious all the time. You can have fun and make this very much a tongue-in-cheek exploration of writing about something as trivial as making a cup of tea, but presenting it in a way that is of utmost importance. And yes, I see the tone is very conversational in his style. Okay, his writing style is going to be um, from your perspective perhaps a lot more formal than Judith Lucy's, but it still is a conversational style, and it very much is made in that way through his use of personal pronouns. And if you notice where he uses you, and also other times when people use personal pronouns, I might use we and our in order to include the audience. And here in George Orwell's essay, he's writing you in order to directly just talk to his reader. We also see humour being used, especially at the end of that paragraph with his hyperbole. He's using allusions, and he has an orientation that presents his ideas and grabs the attention of his readers. Okay, our third example comes from J.B. Priestley, and he has written an essay which some of you may find really interesting and goes straight to your own hearts on doing nothing. So he's written a whole discursive essay on this topic. Here is his concluding paragraph. Wordsworth, to whom we go when most other poets fail us, knew the value of doing nothing. Nobody, you may say, could do it better, and you may discover in his work the best account of the matter. He lived long enough to retract most of his useful opinions, but I do not think that he ever went back on his useful notion that a man could have no healthier and more spiritualizing employment than idling about and starting at nature. If he were alive today, I have no doubt he would preach his doctrine more frequently and more frequently than ever. He would tell us that the whole world will be better off if it spent every possible moment it could these next 10 years lying flat on its back on a moor, doing nothing. And he would be right. Now, thinking about our features, we can see that, yes, he does have a topic. He's writing a whole essay on doing nothing. And he comes back to that point at the end of his paragraph, and he brings it all together, and he does it in a really conversational tone, but there is some formality in the way that he's structuring his ideas and in his language choice, but he's doing it in a pretty facetious way. The whole topic that he's exploring, where he's advocating for, or he's exploring the notion of doing nothing like it is a serious topic, is in itself quite funny. He uses allusions. He's alluding to William Wordsworth, one of Britain's very popular poets, and he has a really well-crafted conclusion. So they are some examples, and I'm using those examples to get you to just have more of an idea of the way that you can write discursive pieces. And for you to reflect on your own writing, things that you may have read yourself. And I want you to think about the potential for you to choose to write a discursive piece in your HSC for Module C. And I want you to think about why it would be good for you to do that. Firstly, discursive writing allows you to formulate thought processes. It allows you to think through something and express your own thoughts on a topic. It invites multiple perspectives. You can present in a discursive piece more than one perspective. You don't have to have a single perspective, and you don't have to necessarily come up with a conclusion and persuade anybody to think anything in particular. You are just exploring an idea. It allows less restrictive creativity of a response. Some of you may be drawn to this freedom that the discursive essay or discursive response provides for you. You may feel like other pieces of writing inhibit your creativity, and you like this freedom. It's really an aesthetic form. So what I mean by that is it really does celebrate the style of writing. It celebrates writing in a way that enjoys using different features and having fun with writing and being playful and showing off how clever and creative you can be in the way that you write. And it encourages you to have a voice and to revel in your voice. So frequently when you're writing in other forms, you have to almost hide your personal voice, and you have to disguise it as a character or make it into a more grown-up version of yourself. And with this discursive piece is that you can express your ideas and express your thoughts in the way that you would normally do it, and you can have fun and in expressing it in your voice. And I think that's really such an advantage, and I think it's really empowering for a lot of writers to be able to write in this way. So let's bring our ideas back together. Let's recap what we have learned about the discursive essay. So, a discursive text primary focus is to explore an idea or topic or opinion without intending to persuade the reader to adopt any single point of view. And that's quite good because it takes the pressure off you when you're writing. Discursive writing can be humorous or it can be serious. And it can have a formal or informal register. With any discursive text, the purpose remains the same: for the reader to engage in a deeply relatable, thought-provoking discussion by exploring multiple perspectives on a topic.